Good afternoon and welcome to the latest in the Lockdown Your Learning's webinar series from ICT Skillnet. This series has dealt with a number of important and interesting topics, all of which you can see on their YouTube channel, which is accessible via the ICT Skillnet homepage. So obviously that means these sessions are recorded for later broadcast and for your reference. So I'm going to be your host today. My name is Paul Hearns and I've been documenting ICT in business for more than 20 years in Ireland. And today I'm joined by Joan Mulvihill, and we're here to discuss the need for creativity in organizations and how it can be a key pillar for innovation and developing a culture of innovation. So Joan is also going to provide some insights on the current wave of digital transformation and how the concept of transformation can have different interpretations for different organizations and cultures. So Joan has a long history in the technology sector in Ireland. She's currently digitalization lead for Siemens in Ireland and at the forefront of driving technology adoption. But she's also been CEO of the Irish Internet Association and Centre Director for the Irish Centre of Cloud Computing and Commerce. But in her role at Siemens, she helps to build a deep commitment and understanding of the needs of Irish business and to help them with their transformation efforts. Now, in terms of our format today, we will have the presentation and then a discussion section. And we encourage you to use the Q&A function, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. And you can enter questions there. Now, you can enter a question at any point, but we'll try and keep them to the discussion section towards the second half. A slight change to the format, though, before we actually run into the presentation, we're actually going to run a poll. So I'm going to ask our producer, Aideen, to run the first poll, and it's just going to be a discussion point as we go. So you should be able to see the poll in front of you there now. So if you wanted to give us your opinion there, and we will use that result later as we go. So with that, I'm going to ask Joan to share her screen and open up with her slides, and we'll jump straight into her presentation. Joan, please.
Oh, Paul, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I barely recognize myself, actually, and that doesn't happen very often. But I want to share my screen, but another part of me is addicted to looking at the results of the poll. So
well, we're going to keep those in check just for now, as a little surprise. And
okay. So, right, let me see if I can change your minds on how you feel about how creative you are by taking you through this presentation. So yeah, I'm Joan Mulvihill. I'm digitalization lead at Siemens, and as Paul said, I've been around a while. So, but most people wouldn't really associate me with talking about creativity, but that is what I'm going to do today, because in my role as digitalization lead, or working in that whole space of digital transformation, I got obviously I work for Siemens, so we're very conscious of the Industrial Revolution, the fourth Industrial Revolution, and the World Economic Forum report that said that the 3 skills most required for the fourth Industrial Revolution are critical thinking, complex problem solving, and creativity. So the first 2, critical thinking, complex problem solving, we talk about those all of the time in tech, in ICT. And what we don't talk too much around is creativity. We talk about innovation, yes, but we don't talk about creativity. And I wondered where we were suddenly going to get that skill, or why did people feel it was so important? Why had it been adjudicated by the WEF as one of the most critical skills? So what I'm going to do today is talk you through a little bit on my thoughts on that. So I was introduced to the concept of artful knowing about this time last year, and it really resonated with me. So most of the times when we talk about creativity in our organization, if I was to do another poll now, I'd say, where are the creative people in your organization? And some of you would say, well, they work in the entertainment kind of side of things. You know, we're running events and stuff like that, and they do all the look and feel, that experiential part, and that's where they work. And then you'll ask other people, well, the other creative people are in branding, they're in marketing. And I don't say the word marketing with any derision, because my master's is in marketing, not in engineering or ICT as it happens. But we think that's where the creative people reside. And then we let the technology people into the creativity, onto our little train, and they do it in the context of design thinking, and that's where we put our creative people in tech. But there is another place for creativity in our organizations, and that is artful knowing. So when we talk about creativity and how it is experienced and how you define it, creativity. So this academic called Chris Seeley, she put together this 4-box quadrant, which should make all ICT people feel very comfortable, because we all like quadrants, and put across the top. So creativity is artful activity that is sensed and experienced. And then to the other extreme, it's very rational and thought through. So the rational and thought through people, which are within context, are branding and design thinking. And the more irrational, sensed or felt part is, in entertainment. Obviously, that's how we, experience things. But again, it's very much within frame of its direct purpose. But then there's the kind of creativity that is sensed and felt and experienced, but that is much more challenging of our thinking, of norms, of how industry works, of how our marketplace works, what's going on in the ecosystem. And that's the bit around, that's where we find artful knowing. And that's where we really want to cultivate creativity in an organization that drives innovation. So cultivating our skills around creativity so that we can get to a place of artful knowing beyond design thinking, but actually challenging how our market works, where the future is going to be, and how we create that. So about a month after I'd been reading all this stuff by Chris Seeley, I attended a workshop, and it was run by Kai and Kippendorf, talking about adaptive leadership. And again, I came across another 4-box quadrant, and it talked about how we strategize within our organizations, and solving problems, or how we innovate. And he basically said, you've got those ideas that have high impact, the ones with low impact, the ones that are easy to do, and the ones that are hard to do. So the ones that are hard to do, that have very low impact, they're a waste of time. And then you've got the ones that are easy to do, low impact, tactical, it's fine, they're easy to do, rattle them out, they're the kind of the low-hanging fruit. And then you've got the stuff that's easy to do and has high impact. So we all love those. High impact, really easy, they're your winning moves. So safe bets every single time. If we go in this direction, it's a winning move. 9 times out of 10, it will work. And then you've got the crazy ideas, the absolutely bonkers stuff that your colleagues come up with, or you come up with, that are really difficult, but have really amazing impact. And these are kind of called adaptive problems. So we don't really know how it's going to work out, and we don't exactly know how we're going to do it. And it's going to be really, really hard. But wow, if we can pull this off, it will have such an amazing impact. And so the example that he gave that day was John F. Kennedy, when he said, we are going to go to the moon. And he said, we are not going to go to the moon because it is easy. We are going to go because it is hard. But that was obviously effort, very, very difficult, impact, absolutely enormous. And they're the kind of challenges, those kind of big adaptive challenges, those crazy ideas that change the world. And they involve a huge amount of creativity, beyond design thinking and rational thought, almost irrational ideas. It is irrational to conceive of some of these ambitions. It is irrational to conceive of some of these ideas and go, how would we ever do it? But they're potentially the ones that are the most disruptive and change the world. So when I had these 2 boxes sets in front of me, I wondered what would happen if you overlaid one on top of the other. And it struck me as funny, and this is just a what if hypothetical, but isn't it odd that waste of time and entertainment fall in the same category? Now, I'm not saying entertainment is a waste of time. Obviously, it's not. But in the grand scheme of major investment, tactics and branding, that kind of makes sense that they overlaid. And then winning moves and design thinking, very logical. Again, completely makes sense. But the crazy ideas fits with the artful knowing. And it struck me that maybe you needed artful knowing to get to crazy ideas, because you definitely need design thinking for winning moves, and you definitely need branding for tactics and all of that. But maybe you needed artful knowing in your organization to come up with the crazy ideas. So A perfect example of that, going back in time again, the one that you probably all know is Ford inventing the car. If you'd asked the market what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And the faster horse is the design thinking solution, effectively. It's, here's the problem, here's the solution, and now we've got this horse, so how do we make it run faster, move faster, carry more, get hurt less, sleep less downtime, whatever it is, designing it to perfection, but based on an existing paradigm and a norm. And we would never have come up with a car. So the car, conceptually, was a crazy idea. But it needs to fit into Artful Knowing because it's that bit about challenging norms, challenging existing systems. So again, we want, so when the World Economic Forum talks about the 3 skills, critical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity for me is the shift. It's the real watershed moment. You can apply critical thinking and complex problem solving to design thinking, and it will give you your winning moves 9 times out of 10. But real disruption is going to be with the crazy ideas. It's going to be with the artful knowing, ergo it's going to be with the creativity. So this is why I think if we want to have game-changing organizations and true, really massive, transformations and innovations for our organizations, for our marketplace, then we need to cultivate our creativity. So this is why we started today's session with asking, are you creative? And I have a real problem with the amount of people who say that they're not. Because quite frankly, I think it'd be virtually impossible to have reached whatever age and stage you are in life unless you are creative. Because all of us, I believe, are born, genuinely born creative. It is creativity that allows us to play, and we all played as children, that allows us to learn, because we learn a huge amount through our play. I have good friends and colleagues, well, not my day-to-day colleagues, but people that I've come across to work who are art therapists, who work in social care, and they all talk about the importance of play. The play in children, but also in adults, in terms of our creativity, in terms of role play, in terms of imagining things, in terms of getting past a lovely term, one I really like, called functional fixedness. So I put up this picture, are you creative? Because if you can remember doing this, when you were a kid, you didn't see a cardboard box and fix on its function as a receptacle for storing stuff to transport them. So a cardboard box, its function in the world is to put stuff in it to transport from A to B or to store it. So it's got a very specific function. But when you're a child, you do not see that function. You are not hardwired into what it always is. There's no convention for what a cardboard box is in your mind. It is anything and everything. So for this little boy, it's a ship. For you, it might have been a castle or a doll's house. It might have been a fire engine. It could have been a car. It could have been anything. And I think that's the thing. It could be anything. So creativity allows us to challenge norms. It allows us to break free of the functional fixedness of it's always been done this way. And it allows us to come up with the car. It allows us to come up with the crazy ideas. So the next question is, how on earth are we going to get this into our workplace and into our vocabulary? So then I started reading some more stuff on an artist called Sol LeWitt, and he was a conceptual artist. Now, I wasn't reading it for anything to do with innovation, but again, reading it, it struck me. He had these 35 sentences on conceptual art, and you can look them up. Sol LeWitt is the artist, conceptual artist, 35 sentences on conceptual art. And I was reading these purely from an artist's mindset. And it struck me that every single one of those sentences seemed to apply to innovation in organizations. And it further reinforced in me this belief that we can borrow principles of art, from art, to drive creativity and cultivate creativity in our organizations. So you will be delighted to know that in the interest of time, I am not going to read out all 35 sentences to you. But if anyone wants them. You can look them up. But if you want to see my version, so what I did is I took all 35 and I translated every single one of them into how they apply to, or how they would be interpreted or could be interpreted to apply to innovation in an organization, and put them in a business context. But what I have here on a piece of paper in front of me, not on these slides, because I really didn't want to bombard you with PowerPoint, is some of my favorites. So let's see how these resonate with you in the context of how we look at innovation. So he wrote of art: banal ideas cannot be rescued by beautiful execution. It is difficult to bungle a good idea. When an artist learns his art too well, it becomes slick art. So those three sentences for me refer to how we measure quality of innovation, and or how we approach it and measure it. And so a banal idea cannot be rescued by beautiful execution. That's a great line about art, but it's also a great line about innovation. If it's a boring idea, it's a boring idea. And it's never, no matter how pretty you make it, it's still going to be a boring idea. It's difficult to bungle a good idea. If an idea is really, really strong, you can release it in beta mode and it will probably still succeed, because the core, the essence, the value is right. And so then maybe the full user experience may not be perfect, but it is really difficult to bungle a good idea, because a good idea captures imagination. And a good idea is something you experience rather than rationally think about. When an artist learns his art too well, it becomes slick art. So I want you to think about companies that maybe were incredibly innovative, broke every single convention for what, I don't know, a phone used to be, and transformed it in our every single thing about it, just transformed every convention we had about what a mobile phone is. And that was their art. Their art was that amazing product design. But we can get too good at it, and we can start making just slick art, which is just slightly better versions of what we did before, and the innovation is gone. So when an artist gets too good at their art, they make slick art. And that's really, really important of an artist, but it's also, we can learn from that in terms of how we innovate and to keep breaking conventions. That what made you special was not the slickness of how beautiful it all was, really. It was the breaking of conventions. It was the disruption of the thing in itself that was brilliant. Another two sentences on rationality. Rational judgments lead to rational judgments. Irrational judgments lead to new experiences. So great innovation tends to be disruptive, and we want it to, so it will bring us new experiences. So it's the importance of irrationality. And we do that all the time in art. And I think there is a place in innovation, in being creative, that is to follow irrational thoughts sometimes. Because if we follow everything rationally, if you do what you did, you get what you got kind of thing. And that implies that the world is rational, and it tends not to be. There is always disruption. And so to not be so wedded to the rational all the time, and to allow for the irrational. And once an idea is established in the artist's mind, and the final form is decided, it must be carried out blindly. There are many side effects the artist cannot imagine, and this will lead to new works. Now, I thought that was a really interesting sentence in relation to art, but it also applies to innovation. So when an idea is firmly established in our heads, we must follow it through. Now, that doesn't mean you bring it to go live, but what you can do is bring it to an MVP and to follow it through, because it's sometimes those accidental side effects that lead us to new paths, but we have to follow things through to allow for that to happen. And then the final one I'm going to read, because I don't want to keep you here all day, is on conventions. When words such as sculpture and painting are used, they connote a tradition. And this places limitations on the artist, who would be reluctant to make art that goes beyond that tradition. So by that, I mean, he talks about in terms of art, when we use certain words, we get very hung up on, again, this is how we always do things. And the creative person has to break out of those and say, it doesn't have to be so. So breaking conventions of what art is. So I'm going to give you, in my next slide, I'm going to put those sentences aside. I've probably not explained them as well as I have them when I have them typed up. But anyway, anyone wants them, I will send them on to you. But my next slide is showing you that. So here are 3 paintings. There's no copyright requirement, because if you look behind me, they exist in real life on my kitchen counter, because there are 3 of my own paintings. And I put them together to explain a concept. So these 3 paintings are all of the same scene, and they are all with exactly the same color palette. So the same paints were used, same colors, same color combinations, same mixing, the whole lot, but presented in very, very different ways. So when I talked about conventions and being innovative, I think these 3 paintings tell a story. So the first one is when words such as painting is used, they connote a tradition. And this places limitations on the artist, who will be reluctant to make art that goes beyond that tradition. That first painting is traditional. And if I was, and for years I painted like that. And I painted within the traditions and conventions of art. That's how painters paint. And it was fine, and it's nice, but it does nothing for me. It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't make me feel anything in the same way as the others do. And it doesn't move things forward. So it's very conventional, it's very traditional, and it's really nice, and I like it. I think it's a lovely painting. And I know for some people it really will work, and it'll suit their style. So I mean, obviously not everything is completely translatable, but I think you have to look at all art in and of its time. So if I look at that and say, right, it's quite impressionistic, and we look back at the impressionist painters, and it's not to dismiss them, because at the time they were the convention breakers. They were absolutely outrageous what they were doing. Painting landscapes, looking at light, not doing fine detail, but just broad impressions of creating atmosphere. But they were absolutely groundbreaking at their time, but it's become conventional now. So when you're painting that style now, it's not as groundbreaking, it's not moving things forward. So anyway, I stopped painting like that a couple of years ago, and my style now tends to be the one in the middle, which is large and bright. And for me, the challenge was to take a scene and break it into the elements. What are the main elements that I need to include, the minimum main elements that I need to include that makes this readable and a user experience that is intuitive. I can look at that and say, yeah, I know what that is. I can see what that is. I don't need an instruction manual with it, or I don't need a whole set of directions. And it's detailed enough to be interesting. But what we really want in technology is version 3. And the 3rd version is the smallest, but it's also the easiest to replicate and scalable. So what's interesting about that is what we're looking for when we're innovating product is to make something really scalable, really easy to repeat, and very, very simple in terms of execution. So often we look at contemporary art and we say, I could do that. And yes, you can. It is the easiest art in the world to copy. But what's not easy is to come up with it in the first place. And that's the creative process. So the creative process for me is to go from a photograph, which does not exist on this screen, but on the left, to the next painting, to the next one, to the final one. Now, in terms of what I would personally prefer to hang on my wall, it's the middle one, but all 3 have merit. And if I was thinking about it from a technology design perspective, and for what is scalable and replicable, I would go for option 3. So I guess what I'm trying to explain is the principles of art, the way I approach solving problems in art is the very same as approach that I would have to innovation in an organization. And it is the values behind it in terms of being disruptive and moving things forward. We can borrow a huge amount of learning from art and apply that into innovation in organizations. And so that's what's brought me down this whole thread about creativity and using creativity in organizations to drive innovation. And creativity in my world happens to be visual art. Creativity for other people will be music, it will be literature, all of those apply just as well, but this happens to be my medium and the one that I use to explain it. The best way to be creative is to restart your creative muscle in your brain and then practice like crazy. So whatever it is you're doing, do it that way. And then, as I say, artful knowing will lead you to the crazy ideas, and that's the one that leads you to disruption. That's my email address, that's my Twitter handle, that's my Insta, and well, my Insta is just where I have my paintings if you want to see any more. And as I say, happy to email the 35 sentences with my applied to business, better explained translations to anyone who wants to see them.
Thank you very much. That's a huge amount to think about, and some very head-stretching ideas there, which I always find are the best. So just a reminder to the audience, the Q&A function is there. We already have some questions in, so thank you very much for those. We will address those as we go. But I'm going to ask our producer Aideen now to run our second poll, and we'll just start the discussion as people are getting in on that as well. So, Joan, I think one of the important things really is that once organizations do realize the importance of creativity in these processes, how do they encourage and facilitate creativity, particularly in the professional disciplines such as ICT or finance, where they're often constrained by things like standards, conventions, regulation, things like that? How do they encourage this kind of thinking and that culture in those situations?
Well, I'm smiling like crazy because it reminds me of the day I was talking about this to our own CEO, Gary, and he was like, but Joan, like, we have to have rules and governance. I said, Gary, I didn't mean creative accounting, you know. So, and I used to work for an accountancy firm. So, no, it's not about, I understand. And I mean, I work, you know, in an engineering company who's evolving to becoming an IT company. So we're going through our own phases of disruption ourselves and change. But I love the fact that you particularly put in the word to facilitate creativity. And one of the things that we're all talking about at the moment is the future of work and how we work and where we work and all of that. And I think certainly for me, it's understanding how creative mind works differently. So we all talk about, you know, we talk now about diversity and inclusion. We talk about neurotypical and atypical. And I would have always thought I'm fairly typical, but actually we're all kind of a bit atypical in that I work in a particular kind of ebb and flow in terms of how I paint. And it turns out I'm exactly the same with my day job. I have got to ebb to flow. So I think it's really important in a creative process. When you create a painting, you do not sit in front of a blank canvas and turn it on and say, right, I have to fill that today. Mm-hmm. There is at least weeks of walking and looking and intense looking and filtering before I say, and I cannot paint a picture. I can't do it. I couldn't set up unless I had it in my head. I know what it looks like. I can see it. And then I can start. And even if what I end up with looks totally different to what I had in my head, I have to hold on to that idea and follow through the process. You can't change genre and style in the middle of a painting. You have to follow your process and let it flow through. But you have to have that ebb time first. So in terms of facilitating within an organization, in terms of how we do innovation, the worst thing I think you can do is lock people into the innovation lab room with the Post-its and the stickers and say, go in and make something today. You've got 3 hours. I don't work that way. And I don't think a lot of creative minds work that way. And if we talk about creativity in our organization, this applies to how we solve problems and exactly in terms of how we paint. It's that idea of, it will come to me when it comes to me, but it only comes to me from living and experiencing and looking. And that reflection time. So I always talk about the importance of ebb to flow. You cannot flow all of the time. You have to ebb, and there's an awful lot of reading, absorbing, looking, experiencing that we need to do, and we need to facilitate that in terms of how we manage our time. You cannot be in meetings all the time. Number one way to facilitate creativity. Stop putting meetings in people's diaries back to back. That does not facilitate creativity. And also scheduling creativity time doesn't really work for me either. But
okay, well, I'm just going to share the results of the poll there, because I think it's interesting. So the majority of respondents have said that they do feel that creativity is supported from a professional perspective. But I think it's interesting what you're saying there about the innovation lab in particular, because I worked in one great company where we were often inspired by the leadership to be creative and to do better. But what we had was in an open area that people passed through constantly. There was a whiteboard that we used to just stick post-it notes to. So as something struck you, as an idea came, as inspiration hit, you just scribble it down and stick it on that. And people would take them off, take other people's, modify them, combine them, and go back. And this was long before we had ever heard of things like agile methodologies and stuff like that. It was simply a way that we used to have for sharing and combining ideas. So again, I think it's that idea, as you said, of don't lock people into an innovation lab. That was essentially our innovation hub, whereby you passed through it as you needed to and came back to it as necessary. So it's interesting.
I'm loving that you mentioned agile there, actually, because one of the things, it's really interesting how I borrow principles of art and apply them to technology, but I've actually applied technology principles to art in terms of how I approach painting. And when I'm in the process of doing it, I run mini scrum meetings for myself. So I paint in sprints. So I'll do a bit, and then I'll walk away, have a little one-to-one stand-up meeting with myself, because I'm always standing up anyway when I'm painting. And I walk around the house or down the garden and back up again. And then I'll agree with myself the next sprint, and I will not stop until that sprint is done. And then you step back. You look at the whole again and agree, but it's always with the same vision. You hold on to the vision in your head, but I do apply that. But you end up in a meeting on your own. You know, there's a lot of talking to yourself involved.
Okay, well, addressing the first question that came in then, where Anthony is saying that surveys have indicated that 3 to 5% of employees in firms are creative. And he's asking if you agree, but also then how to manage creative people. Now, to be honest, that sounds quite low to me and quite pessimistic.
It's heartbreaking.
But if in your experience in trying to facilitate creativity, surely that's quite low.
That's insanely low to me. I mean, I find that disputably low, because I think, you know, when we put up those 3 skills, and I think you and I had spoken about this before, but we educate people on critical thinking, complex problem solving, and we've kind of educated the creativity out of them. But I do think it's there. I mean, it's dormant in some people, maybe, or that, you know, muscle has not been used in a long time. The way I look at it is this: I am alive, therefore I am healthy to some extent, because by virtue of being alive, you know, my muscles work. I can move about, therefore I'm healthy. And the measure of my health is an arbitrary thing. I quit smoking a month ago, so it's probably better than it was then. But I am alive, therefore I am healthy-ish. I am alive, therefore I am creative. You know, everybody has it. It's just the measure to which we exercise it is kind of here and there. So I will go out and I will go for a run this evening, and I will get fitter. I may not be fit to run in the Olympics, but I will be fitter because I practice, because I train. So I will always get to a level of fitness. And I think what we've done is we've stopped exercising our creative muscle. So we've sat there and said, I'm not creative. You played as a child. You are creative. If you've ever cracked a joke or made a play on words, you are creative. So 3 to 5% breaks my heart that people would judge themselves so harshly, and that organizations would maybe judge their people so harshly. I think we are all innately creative. I just think we need to start flexing that muscle in our brain. Some people will naturally, they will just get fitter at it faster. Some people, and some people get fitter faster in physical sense as well. You know, everyone will find their pace and their speed, but everybody has a degree of creativity, and I think that should be nurtured just for our soul. In terms of innovation in our organization, not everybody is going to get to you know, the top pick of the sports team, you know, for creativity. But some people can, I genuinely believe, start exercising their creativity muscles more, becoming more match fit for creativity, because that is the winners in terms of their race for competitiveness, the race for disruption in marketplaces. It's who's got the creative people, who's delivering on those ideas. And it's not enough to have the creative people. You have to let the creative people be creative and follow through and back their crazy ideas.
Well, that comes to the second part of the question, and about managing creative people. That I suppose a lot of the conventions of management could tend to stifle those creative activities. So those the blue sky sessions, the eureka moments. How do you go about making sure that you have that innovative culture, but that it can also be managed in that business sense?
Well, I think it's really interesting, Paul, that you've used the word managed. It is like herding cats. No, I think it's about leading. I think you can lead creative people easier than you can manage them. And if you think about adaptive leadership and the challenge that John F. Kennedy said, we are going to go to the moon, that's leadership. The management happens in NASA going, you just said we're going to the moon. Did anyone know about this? How are we going to get there? The management happens in there, but that vision is, I'm going to lead creative people by saying, we're going to set some crazy goal, and then I'm going to let them do their thing. So that's it's the allowing space and being able to hold that creative tension, that perspective of, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, or rather how they're going to get there, but I know they will get there. So if I was to present, for example, the last painting first, you would go, what the heck is that? I have a vision of that. Sometimes you don't need to see all the workings, but you know, in terms of managing, we'll take you through the process to show you how we got to the end thing. But as long as it's usable and functional and readable, allow the person to go through the process to get to their thing. And that process, it's really important in art. It's really important in innovation. An artist will have their process. It's not luck. I know it sounds like crazy ideas, and that artful knowing is it's all very sensey, feely. There is process there, and every good artist has a process. They have a practice. They have a way of getting to it, to getting to an end. And we just don't put management structures around it and call it agile, although I use effectively agile to get to a painting. But there is process there. So creative people are as easy to manage, but I think respond better to leadership.
Well, I suppose bringing it back then to the second part of our outline in terms of digital transformation, because again, one of the key things that has been highlighted around digital transformation is the fact that it is genuinely transformative. It is not merely iterative or developmental, that it is truly transformational. So where does the nexus of the creative element and the transformative come together?
I'm just so glad you asked me that. So, because when I was going through my slides, I'm going, oh, there was one of the sentences I really wanted to talk about. So, concept versus idea, and digital as a medium. Digital is a medium, like paint. I use the medium of paint to convey what I want to convey to the audience, to the user, to the consumer. That is my medium. Technology is just the medium. So I want us to stop getting so caught up on the digital part and talk about the transformation part. Now, the difference between concept and idea. The concept is the direction. It's the value proposition. Start with the value proposition, the concept. That's the transformation bit. That's the nexus part. If you can angle in on that. The ideas are, let's take a concept. I did a series of paintings called Fragments. That was the concept. The concept was, the concept was, I'm locked in. I can't do landscapes anymore. We're in our houses. what can I do? And I thought about how our lives were all broken up into these small fragments of houses and 2 meters and counties, and we couldn't move beyond that. So I had this concept around fragments and how our lives are so fragmented. Then the idea was, actually, I could do loads of internal little landscapes and abstract them around my house. So I did a whole series of paintings. One, fragments was concept, ideas was how to do that. And I would do them small paintings on paper, behind glass, all reflecting the thing. So that's the difference between the concept and the idea. I don't have any of them lying around, sorry. It's the same when I think about digital transformation. The concept has to be the value proposition. That's the big thing that we hold up there. That's the transformation. That's the, what do you want to transform, change for your market, for your customer? How can you bring value in a new way? That's your concept. You drive ideas out of those, and the digital part is just the medium. Now, what is brilliant about this medium, so I use acrylics, I don't use oils. Oils take too long to dry. Watercolors are too unstable. Acrylics are a really lovely, stable medium to work with. That's why we use technology. That's why digital is so brilliant for what we're trying to achieve, because as a medium, it is so flexible. It allows us to do things quickly. It allows us to do things precisely. It is so flexible for what we need it to be. So it's this amazing medium, but let's appreciate it for being a medium and not make it the art in itself. The art, the genius, the innovation, the creativity, that's in your concept, your value proposition for your customer. And the idea is that's what we want to deliver for the customer. This is the medium that we're going to use. And with that medium and that concept, these are the different ideas we can use to execute it. The ideas of the execution. Okay. I hope that is.
Okay. No, I see there again, it's the process that leads in those steps to identifying and then achieving what your overall ambitions are. So again, yeah, it's applying what you know before to the creative process to achieve it. So that's very interesting. But actually, that's leading us nicely into the next question that's come in there, where they're asking, if something is easy to recreate, repeatability, how do firms achieve barriers to entry and competitive advantage? So I suppose if that process does become learned and repeatable, does that mean perhaps that it loses value somewhat in repeatability, and that it's not quite as creative perhaps as it was in a first iteration?
Okay, so that's a very logical question to ask. And I suppose when I say repeatability, I mean, for me, as in my organization, I'm going to make one, I'm going to make 5 million of them. It's replicable. But I chose those 3 paintings to show that study because they are copyrighted to me. And when we talk about no one else can use those, can steal them. I mean, you can make a painting, but you can't sell them because I own the patents. That's my original art. So I own that, I protect that. If it's technology, you own that, you protect that with a patent. No one else can use it, but it's that it's scalable for you as your business. It is scalable for you to, for whatever you are coming up with, whatever value proposition you have, that it's scalable within your organization, that you can patent protect that. There's also, I suppose, the first mover advantage in terms of originality, you know, and it's the same with art. The Impressionists were groundbreaking at the time. They were the first to do that. No one remembers anyone painting in an Impressionist style circa 1975. You remember the guys who were doing it in 1914, you know? So that's a bit of how we create those barriers and those barriers to entry, and I suppose, yeah, and protecting your IP. And you do it in exactly the same way in art as you would in tech, and vice versa.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to ask our producer, Aideen, to rerun our original poll again. And just while people are looking at that and voting, I'll maybe round off with our last question. Just in terms then for individuals, we've already seen about how organizations can facilitate creativity. Again, from a professional perspective, how can people start to maybe facilitate their own creativity and do things, do exercises, do sort of, you know, those little daily muscle flexing elements that can help them to develop their own creativity?
Brilliant question. Honestly, I mean that. I don't know if that was one of the ones that we prepared or if I'd remembered that you were going to ask me that, but it is a great question. So first thing I would do to say, suggest to anyone is, if you've got time, pick up a copy of The Artist's Way. It's a great book and well worth anyone following, no matter how artistic you think you are. So what it will say is, write your morning pages, or go make first thing challenge between now and Christmas, make an artist date with yourself once a week for half an hour. Do something with yourself that is creative, as in go for a walk and take a photograph, or sketch something, or play some music, something that really, or write a piece of poetry, or read some, or do something for a half an hour. Go and visit a gallery online. The RHA have an exhibition on at the moment. There's loads of galleries are doing really brilliant, amazing things online. So you can go and visit those, or a music concert, whatever. Make an artist creative date with yourself for a half an hour once a week, preferably once a day. And start those creative juices going. There's loads of brilliant online courses, creative classes going on. I'm actually running an art masterclass for Siemens leadership team next week. Heaven help me or heaven help them. But one of the things that I would really say to people is, a lot of us, if you were good at drawing in school, you were told you were good at art. Some of the best artists I know are not good drawers. I am an adequate drawer. I'm not a brilliant drawer. I'm good at drawing, but I'm not outstanding. But I make great art. I think so. Well, you know, you've got to love what you do. But yeah, there's a big difference. So don't let whatever you were told in a formal education system determine whether or not you think you're good at art. Is if you're enjoying what you're doing and if you love what you do, then that is brilliant. The most freeing, beautiful, amazing moment in my life was a couple of years ago when I started painting in a way that was totally different, and I stopped caring that other people liked or disliked them. I let myself have my own crazy ideas, and it is just such a joy for me, the people who love them. But it's equally kind of comforting that some people don't, because some of the best ideas were hated when they were first floated, and they were crazy. So you know what, maybe you're onto something. So you know what, bite the bullet. Don't care what anyone else thinks. Take out your kids' twistables or your felt tip markers or your pen and do something, anything. And you know what, it's painting for me, but it might be writing poetry for you. Our CEO, Gary O'Callaghan, CEO of Siemens in Ireland, is a brilliant poet. He writes great poetry. People don't know that about Gary. I make him post them everywhere. I'll be going to Kong for Congregation this weekend. Well, I'll be going virtually. Anyone's ever interested in a bit of creative writing should do that every year. Write your blog post on your topic, and we all sit in huddles and talk about them. I actually wrote a poem this year, so that's kind of funny. But there's a million ways to express yourself creatively. Just start doing it. And actually, if you've got kids, like I don't, but I'm possibly like a big kid, play. Imagination gameplay. You know, get in a cardboard box with your kids if that's what they want to do and help them make all that stuff. You are being creative every time. You are allowing yourself see something beyond what its function is and imagining it as something else.
Very good. Okay. Well, I think it's definitely time to share our results for the second run of that poll. So in the first run of the poll, before we had all of that wonderful head-stretching information, we had 45% who considered themselves creative and 55% who said no. So now, as you can see, that has changed dramatically. So I think we certainly have provoked some thought and some change of perception there. So,
well, I'm a bit of a nerd, right? So for a creative person, I'm all into the numbers, ironically. But we've got 14 versus 2. Is it because we lost the non-creative people and that's why the percentage is lower, or do we have the same net number?
We have roughly the same as we started with. We have one big dropout, but
we haven't lost too many people. I was just checking.
No. No, in fact, we have more people voting in the second run than we did in.
Oh, that's brilliant. Sorry, but it's good of me to want to notice the difference, really.
Indeed, absolutely, absolutely.
I want people to realize how creative they are. And it's such, like, I know I sound totally evangelical about it, but oh my God, it's so much fun, if nothing else.
Okay, well, just the other thing to mention is that there are thanks coming in via the Q&A for showing your paintings and for using them to illustrate your points. So again, as I think Terry Pratchett put it, that any art is exposing the self and is a reckless thing to do, but always worth it.
I have to. It's one of the most terrifying things is when I've been asked to do a commission, and someone comes here and they want to see it. And my mother rang me and she said, "Have you given that man his painting yet?" No. She said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well, as long as it's here and he hasn't seen it, it's still perfect."
Yeah.
And he came to the house and I had it covered, and I said, "And we're here a while," and I said, "Do you want to see your painting now?" And he said, "Yeah." And I stood like a body block in front of it, just dreading that moment of the judgment. And part of you is free to say, okay, well, if they don't like it, they don't like it, but it is very personal. But I think, yeah, thank you. I appreciate the appreciation, and I really, really do. And I hope it wasn't too indulgent. And if anyone does want to talk to me about, I don't know, a masterclass or anything like that, or showing them how to do it, that's cool. I mean, I haven't got a program or anything, but I'm sure I could work something out.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we have run terribly over time, so I'm going to wrap things there. So, just one reminder that we do have a strong program of sessions coming up. So, on the 26th, we're going to be speaking to Mark O'Sullivan around maximizing research development and innovation opportunities and taking advantage of supports that are out there. So on the 3rd of December, we will have Enterprise Change and Innovation with Lavinia Morris from KBC. And again, there's going to be a strong innovation focus there. So all that remains for today is to thank everybody. Joan, for putting so much of yourself as well as your professional insights into that. Thank you to Aideen, our producer, for handling a non-regular format. And thank you to all our attendees for the great questions and comments as well. So thank you very much to everybody, and to ICT Skillnet for hosting today. And we'll hopefully see you at another Lockdown Your Learning session soon. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this webinar, please follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn to be kept up to date with all our news, events and programs. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one.